So I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about proportion and trying to draw proportions on, or redraw a face in proportion in a new space. So you should have a 5x7 inch photo, and this should be of yourself. Now, what you're going to do from here is you can grab a new piece of copy paper and draw on that, or you can draw in this space here. Whatever you draw on, we're going to transfer it to a new page. So you don't have to worry about erasures or anything, because any kind of mess ups or whatever, you're not going to see on the final piece. So what I'm going to start off with is I'm going to first draw in an oval. And my oval, I'm going to draw it on the actual image first, and then I'm going to do a comparative measurement to get the right height and width for my oval on a larger scale. So I'm scaling this up and keeping it proportional. So remember that the hairline and everything is below the top of the head. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the top of the head, and I'm going to draw my oval around the face. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me a nice starting point. I can kind of see where the shape is going to be. Now, on this side, I'm going to draw an oval. Now, I want to aim for an oval that's height and width. So on mine, it looks like when I compare the width to the height, it's going to be a little bit more than half of the height. So when I draw this new oval over here, I wanted to fill up that side over there. Make it at least, let's do at least 6 inches tall. Oops. At least 6 inches tall. From here to here, 6 inches at least. And then I'm going to compare the height and width. Now you saw that I did an oopsie right here, and I didn't quite get the right oval shape. That's okay. I'm just going to fix that real fast. Notice how I draw it first and then I erase the mistake. That's ideal because sometimes you have a tendency to redraw the same line if you don't draw it first. Now, I'm going to compare the width to the height. So I said it should be more than half of the height. So when I look at this, it's more than half of the height, and I can compare it here again and just make sure that it looks about right. It's about right. If it wasn't right, then what I could do is redraw my line. You can see that quite a bit of my pencil is sticking up over the edge. So it's more than half. You can even be a little more exact. So if you go, okay, this is about, it's less than 2/3, more than height, it's halfway between those two, you can do that too. Now, the next step is going to be my eye line. So I am going to, you know what, actually, let's go ahead and do the center line first. So my face is actually turned 3/4, which means that the center of everything is going to be shifted a little bit. And I'm going to get this curved line. So from the middle of the oval and the top of the oval, I want to go through the space between the eyes, through the middle of the nose here, the middle of the mouth, and come back down. Now this space, if I measure it here, is going to be able to fit into almost 1/4 here. So it's about 1/4 of the width. So how do I find 1/4 of the width? I find a half first. So this is a half. And then I find half of a half, and that's 1/4. So half of a half would be right about here. There we go. That's about right. Here's the half here. And all I need to do now is just carefully draw in that line to use for measuring everything out. So I'm just going to kind of put this in. And, some things can change. This is not exact. You're not a computer. You're not trying to be exact. You're just trying to be near accurate. So this is very popular way of drawing portraits is to kind of grid it out like this using the features on the face to kind of align things. So next is the eyes. And when I draw in my line, I want to make sure it goes through the corners of the eyes. So the outside corners and inside corners should line up with my eye line. Now, where that goes on here, I have to first figure out where it went on this oval. So if I measure from the chin, or from the eye line to the chin, I can find that it is almost halfway into the face. So almost exactly halfway. So I'm going to go, all right, where's halfway? If this is halfway, let's see, is that halfway? Whoop, very close. Yes, so this is what I want halfway. And you'll notice that it's slightly curved too. So when I do this, you want to slightly curve it. Just a little bit. Just a tiny bit of a curve there. Now, because remember, the face is actually a little bit curved in the front. Now, the next one is going to be the nostrils or the nose line. The nose line, I'm going to line it up with right below the wings of the nose. And I want it to be parallel with my eye line. So it's going to have a curve as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and compare. Is this, like in our standard measurements, halfway down the face? So let's look. Halfway. Is it halfway? It's not quite halfway. It's actually, this height is probably about 1.5 of this space right here. If you're not quite sure how to get it, you can compare it to other things. That's why it's called comparative measurements. So I could go, all right, I've already got this space measured out. How many of those can I fit in this space on my photograph? So I'm going to measure it from the edge of the oval to the center. And I'm going to go, how many? So I can fit 1 and about 1/2 of one of these. So I'm going to go over here. I know this measurement's correct. And I can go, okay, I'm going to fit 1 and then 1/2, which will be about right here. That's where my nose line is going to be. And once again, I want this to be parallel to the eye line. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure to measure it so that it's that I look at that eye line when I'm drawing this one so that they line up. Okay, so next is the mouth line. Now I'm making kind of a weird expression on my face here. So keep in mind that we want it to go through the corners of the mouth. And in my case, because my face is turned and the corners of my mouth are upturned, it doesn't quite go through the center. It actually does line up with the top of the lip here. So I'll just have to keep that in mind when I'm doing this. You could make the curve a little bit more severe if you wanted to. I prefer to keep these lines parallel and just work off of those because it becomes kind of like a grid drawing if you make the lines parallel with each other. So, and we've done grid drawings before. So what I'm going to have to do is figure out how much space is there here. Now I know this space already because I've drawn on there. So I'm going to think, okay, so how many of these fit into this space? So I can go 1, it fits almost 2 exactly on mine. If it's not a very clear measurement, maybe you can think, okay, how many of these fit into this space? How many? 1, 2, it's almost like 2.5 fit or 3.5 fit into this space if you wanted to. Or you could do this again and measure it there, how much of that fits in there. So I said it was about half of the space between the eye line and the nose line. So I'm going to find that first. That is a little higher. That would be like this. Perfect. My mouth line would exist right here. And once again, I want to make sure that it is parallel, or as close to parallel as I can get with that nose line and eye line. Okay, so there you have it. I now have kind of a grid going with this. Now you could go even further. You could put a line in for where your eyebrows are. You can even put in a shape for the back of the head, since we're going to see part of the back of the head in this. One thing though is do what fits in your drawing. All right, so if you can see, if you don't have long crazy hair like in my drawing or my photo here, and you can see the back of your head, go ahead and put that oval in there and just kind of knock that out for a moment. Okay, so my next thing I want to do is I want to line up where these things are: the eyes, the mouth. I need to figure out where all of these things are. Okay, now we know the standard measurements, but you have to keep in mind that the standard measurements may not necessarily apply to your drawing. Not everybody has the exact same measurements. We don't all look exactly the same. So just kind of take your time with trying to figure out if it where everything goes. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out how much of this, how big this eye is in this space here. So when I measure this eye, it's a little bit small. This space is a little bit smaller than the eye, and same with this space. It's actually about pretty even how much distance there is on either side of the eye in this little opening here. So I could possibly split this up into thirds first, since it's about a third of this. And then make the middle third a little bit bigger than both of the side thirds. So I'm going to go ahead and make this just a tiny bit bigger. And it fits there. For some of you, it's going to be really easy because your person is looking straight on or near straight. And you can just kind of compare the size to that space. So this is now, like I said, it's about a third. It's a little bigger than a third. Because it should be bigger than both of these sides. And then these sides should be even with one another, because that's the measurement I got over here. These ones are equal, right? So look at yours. Is it about a quarter of the face, like we talked about with our proportional measurements on the standard facial proportions? Or is it a little bit different? If it helps you, you can measure some distances you already have here. So maybe I can go, all right, so I know this size on my paper. How many of those fits in there? It's pretty close, right? I can fit about, let's say, a little more than one in there. How many does the eye fit, So I could go, okay, is this, yeah, it looks about right. So I'm doing okay, because in my other measurements, everything's comparing. Now, once I have that eye in there, I need to now determine how wide this eye is going to be. So what I can do is I can compare these two eyes to each other. How wide is it? Now, if you're looking straight on, the eye should be around the same size, the same width. But mine is not looking straight on, so it's complicated. It's about 2/3 of the size of the width of this eye here. So that means that on here, if I were to divide this into thirds, it would be around this width. It's probably a little bigger than that. And it goes almost, you can see how close it is to that center line there. So if I were to start it about right here, it would come up to about there. So that's the width of the other eye there. So there you have it. I'm started with that. Now that I have that in place, it's a lot easier to line everything up. But you want to make sure that you double check your measurements. Make sure that this looks right. Sometimes it's hard to tell if it looks right. So what you can do is, rather than trusting your eyes, you can trust your measurements. So if I'm not sure if that's the right width, maybe I can compare it to something else. Maybe I can go, okay, what's the distance between here and here? Does it match the width of this? Oh my goodness, it's really close. So I can measure here, and then look at that. I did a great job. So hopefully you're using those comparative measurements. It does make it easier if you do it that way. Now, my next thing is going to be figuring out where all of these other things fall. So the nostril here, you can see, does line up with the corner of the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a straight line down. The corner of the mouth here is halfway over. So if I'm looking here, halfway is about right here. I know that the corner of my mouth is going to be, oops, that needs to be straight. It's going to be right here. And then on the other side, it's a teeny bit trickier because we're looking at a 3/4 view. It looks like about center of the eye. That's where the nostril in shadow here is. So center of the eye. Now I've got a big nose too, so my proportional measurements for my nose are going to be much larger than some of you. And then right here, this corner is pretty close to lining up with this nostril. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line down. So now I know where all my features are going to go. And I can actually start at this point in lightly sketching it in. I know that I have a nose coming around here. You're focusing on contour line drawings, which means no shading. Don't shade. Don't worry about that. You're not trying to shade. And what I'm doing is I'm doing the exact same thing that I did for my grid drawing. I'm looking at where these lines fall, and I am just copying what I see. So you can see here, it's about right here that this nostril comes up, comes pretty close to the edge here, and draw that in. The eye, this eye kind of comes a little bit below. It's a little more rounded on this side. It's kind of hard to see, I'm sure, from your perspective. And then up here, it curves. It comes to a little bit more of a point here, and then finds its way back to the corner. Over here, this large eye, it kind of doesn't really dip below the line. It's pretty much in line with the corners because of the facial expression. And then about a little in between, maybe 1/4 of the eye, is where there's kind of a transition from being curved to being a little more flat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, while you're drawing this, you have to keep in mind still those proportions. So one thing I can do is I can go, okay, so how tall is this eye compared to the width of the eye? And when I compare it, it's about half of the size of the eye. So I can go, okay, here's about half. And the height should be around there. It's a little bit, it should be a little bit under the width. It's very close to half, but it's a little bit under, so that's good. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just start drawing in some of these little pieces here, keeping in mind where everything is. So I just made a boo-boo here. I started drawing the lips on that line, but they actually need to go below the line. The center of the lips actually line up pretty closely with that line. And then I can look and go, all right. Or the top of the lips, not the center. And I'm focusing on all of the areas that have dark value changes. So here, really, really dark value changes, or high contrasting, I guess I should say. High contrasting value changes. Compare things. So how tall is the width, or how tall is the top lip versus the bottom lip? And you can compare. My bottom lip is kind of pushed out more, so it's about twice as thick as the top lip. And you're just drawing what you see, okay? So focus on what you see. Don't just think about, what we drew before with the eyes and the nose and mouth and hair and everything. Those are supposed to be kind of a practice round. You're going to be drawing what you see. See, I can look at this and go, all right, I need to go really close to this line here, and it needs to bend over to this line down here. I can also start to shape the face a little bit more. So my oval, the face kind of goes in a little bit more right here to get that chin in place. And then right up here, the face curves. And I have that happening. I can see about where the iris is. You're just going to keep working on that. Keep drawing this shadow, for example. I would draw the shadow so I know where to shade it. Remember, it's a contour line drawing, so you're not going to do any shading. Not yet. Your eyebrows, you can measure. Okay, so how far away is it? The top of my eyebrow is the same as the height of my eye. So the top of my eyebrow is going to be about right here. And there's a line for the eyelid. It's just a matter of taking your time and really calculating everything using what you've learned throughout the year. Don't rush through this. Measure, compare. Eventually, what will happen is it'll start to look like it. And when you start to erase some of your guidelines, you'll start to see that. You'll start to know if it's looking right, especially when you start shading. But we don't want to start shading until we're working on the actual piece. So keep working on it. Keep adding in all of your values. Keep adding in, drawing your contours around your values. You want to focus on high contrasting values. So for example, on the nose, there's no high contrasting values here. I'm not going to draw anything other than this line, right? Same with right here. You can see that it's lighter here, but if I draw a little oval there, it's going to give me problems later on. So this is what I would do in shading. It's not a high contrasting value. You're only doing those high contrasting values. This is a high contrasting value. This is a high contrasting value. Anything that has a darker line on it or outline, that's what you need to do. You can see a nice crisp edge. That's what you need to copy. Alrighty. So thank you for watching. I hope that this helps you work.